Type 8s are bold, they're independent, they're honest. They're likely the person who has continually pushed you to be more thoughtful, egalitarian, and driven in your own life. They really are pushers of us into being better, being more, getting through discomfort and doing it anyway.
Welcome to the For the Love podcast with me, Jen Hatmaker. Today, we explore all things Enneagram 8 with two experts, Enneagram and Coffee's Sarajane Case and Conscious Enneagram's Abby Robbins. Hey everybody, Jen Hatmaker here. Hi, welcome to the For the Love podcast. Super glad you're here today. You probably know that we are in a series right now called For the Love of the Enneagram, and it is awesome. I mean, it's just awesome. If you've missed any of it, I highly encourage you to go back and pick it up. Even if it's not your number, even if it's not, because we are all connected to people that we love that are every number on the Enneagram. Every single episode has been so enlightening for me. I've learned so much. It's helped me understand my friends better, my husband better, my kids, myself. Like, just go back and listen. Definitely start with episode 1 with Suzanne Stabile. She kind of high levels the whole Enneagram deal for us. Anyhow, for this episode, finally, I'm so pleased to tell you that once again, we have not one, but two guests who are going to help us unpack all the complex goodness inside of those wonderful Enneagram Eights, also sometimes known as the challengers. Oh, Enneagram Eights. Oh, I love them. They're such a force in the world. So I'm just telling you, if you're lucky enough to have an 8 in your life, congratulations. You must feel really secure and really safe, because that's how the 8s make me feel for sure. I love how they show up in the world. So to begin, Sarajane Case is an author and a speaker and a podcaster, and she's based out of Asheville, North Carolina. You might know her by her online moniker, Enneagram and Coffee. Right? Have you seen this? So she teaches self-support through the lens of the Enneagram, and her writing has been featured everywhere, from like Apartment Therapy to Parade magazine. Sarajane does some of her best work on Instagram at Enneagram and Coffee. That's her handle. Plus, she's put out a book called The Honest Enneagram and a podcast called Enneagram and Coffee. So she's hustling some fantastic work out into the Enneagram world. Sarajane happens to be an Enneagram 7 who's going to help us unpack some of the nitty-gritty traits of one of her wing options, which is an 8. And then, after Sarajane, to tell you specifically about the lived experience of an 8, we have a stellar Enneagram teacher named Abby Robbins, who you might know under the moniker of the Conscious Enneagram. So Abby is another trained Enneagram teacher. We've had so many incredible teachers in this series, who is certified in the Narrative Enneagram, which we're going to talk about because that's not something we've really parsed out thus far in the series. Abby is also a yoga therapist whose teaching combines the very transformative insight of the Enneagram with the holistic and like embodied practices of yoga therapy, which is really important. The sort of body intersection here matters. Abby seeks to share these two very powerful systems to help people better understand themselves and those around them and live just more fulfilling and meaningful lives, which is exactly what the Enneagram has offered me. Both of these conversations are just fire. So I'm so pleased to share my conversations with these incredible teachers. First, with Sarajane Case of Enneagram and Coffee up first. Sarajane, I have watched you and listened to you, and now I am so delighted to have you on the For the Love podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
100%. So before we move into the Enneagram Eights, which is what this episode is about, can you just talk to us briefly about what is your type?
Yeah, so I'm a 7-wing 8, and I'm a counter type. So I'm a social 7, which means that in behavior, I can look a lot like a 2 or a 1, but in motivation, I'm definitely 100% internally a 7. So I essentially know that being my unabashed 7 self isn't the most it won't keep me in good social standing all the time. And so I've learned to really put myself last, over sacrifice, and live in moderation as a way to be more socially acceptable.
That's so interesting. Is your 8-wing pretty strong?
Yeah, it's pretty hefty.
Okay. You can speak quite saliently to the 8, not only as an expert, but as somebody with a strong 8-wing. So let's get into that. So we've got the Enneagram 8s to discuss today, which in its moniker is sometimes known as the challenger. Can we dig in here a little bit more? Because there's always more than meets the eye. You know, there's always sort of a reduced, truncated description of every number, which just never tells the full story at all. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit more broadly about some of the main traits of an Enneagram 8, what they love, what they don't love, what motivates them, what they're afraid of, what they're excited about, etc.?
So type 8s are strong, charismatic leaders. In childhood, they say that a lot of 8s often experience some form of betrayal. So something that settled the idea into them that they would need to take care of themselves. And because of this, they learn to lean on their strength and hide their vulnerabilities to prevent being open and susceptible to further betrayal, like down the road or in the future. So a lot of times you might hear a type 8 say, like, I don't want that to be used against me. That could be a phrase.
Yes.
And this can lead our 8s to kind of developing a defensive stance. And this can happen both in defense of themselves, but also in defense of those in need. So you also might see that happening on behalf of someone else. If they see someone who they see as vulnerable, that same strength gets kind of wrapped around the people in their life. In general, type 8s are bold, they're independent, they're honest. They're likely the person who has continually pushed you to be more thoughtful, egalitarian, and driven in your own life. Like they really are pushers of us into being better, being more, getting through discomfort and doing it anyway.
It's so true. I think about Jo Saxton, one of my very favorite 8s. She's a coach. She just sits in the pocket of her own strengths, which is pushing others to their highest ideals. Sometimes 8s have a reputation that they don't really need people and that connection is not important to them. But my 8s tell me that that's not true. It's just so happens that sometimes one of their basic fears, either being, betrayed or controlled, shows up like that inside perception of connection. So could you talk about that a little bit more? What an 8 actually wants internally in terms of relationship and connection and closeness, and then sometimes what that looks like on the outside?
I think about our type 8s as almost like a 2, a really warm, gooey, mushy 2, wrapped in steel, like wrapped in a coat of armor.
Great.
And it's
what a
like
good description.
And they have like this soft open center and they're aware. It's like they're hyper aware of like, this is gooey in here. And I really can't let anyone find out, because if I let them find out, then they're going to use that against me, or it's not safe. And I think that we can hold empathy for that, right? Because at some point in their life, they received the message that that's true, that they aren't safe. And so when I think about our 8s, instead of assuming they don't want love, I have to assume that I have to ask the question, where did you learn to be so strong? Like what in your life caused you to have to power up instead of receive?
If we could take that one step further, I'd like to talk about how an 8 feels about their feelings. What's the monologue inside an 8's mind as they observe and sort of evaluate their own feelings? Because as a 3, when I think about how do I feel about my feelings, I definitely feel them. That's the first way that I experience any given moment, of course, is right through my emotions. But I pretty quickly move it up to my brain. Like, okay, that's enough. What do I think about this and how am I going to solve it or get past it or whatever? So how do 8s feel about their feelings, and then what do they do with them?
There's a demand for honesty and upfrontness from our 8s. And so in some ways, there's almost a clean break between sharing their feelings if it's from like that intellectual place, right? Like if I can say like, oh, I had this feeling existed, but there's no invitation into that feeling with them. And so I think that that's one difference. It's almost like a separation. Like I can share, but there's a sharing from a place of distance. And if they feel like I'm pulling at them or pulling at their emotions, then a wall will go up much faster. And The other thing that can happen is that their anger might be the feeling they feel first. When a negative emotion arises, it might start as anger. And a lot of the work is really getting under the anger and saying, okay, I'm angry, but what's really here? What's the more vulnerable message? Am I feeling anxious about something? Because typically there's something under that anger feeling, but they have to really dive into it and get real with themselves and with others about what that is.
That's really useful to hear for people in a relationship with an 8. Just understanding that sometimes the first presentation of any feeling, any given feeling, looks mad. And to have the patience and the fortitude to stay with that and then dig a little is such a useful tool. So speaking of relationships with 8s, what is your perception of how 8s are in romantic relationships, kind of in intimate relationships? What is their work like in order to get to a place where they trust? They trust someone else to be loyal to them and to not betray them and to not control them and to love them as they are.
So a lot of times 8s really fear loss of control of their life, not necessarily control of other people, but more so their control of their own choices. And so a lot of the work is in releasing, creating a collaborative space where you're deciding together. That can take some practice and some work. The other thing that our 8s, I think, really need to focus on is, again, am I choosing strength over vulnerability in this moment? To maintain a committed relationship, right, we have to choose vulnerability. And it's a lot more, it's a quicker pathway for our 8s to choose strength than to pause, slow down, and choose vulnerability. It's just a faster access point.
I relate to that so much. I have to really tuck myself into staying in a vulnerable space. Obviously, one of the greatest things about an 8 is how much wonderful work that they do in the world, how many 8s are at the helm of advocacy work and justice work. And they're such strong and capable leaders. They're not easily intimidated by opposition. In fact, that's kind of highly engaging, in fact. So what would you say, what are healthy 8s offering when they are kind of in their highest ideals, when they are offering their best selves to the world? What does that look like?
Yeah, that protection, that bubble of protection, and that bubble of strength, it gets opened up to hold more people. So for most 8s, they have themselves, they have maybe their significant other, maybe their mom or their dad, or, close family members and friends. That expansiveness, that opening of that space, inviting other people into it is this beautiful opening that our 8s can do, where they provide protection and strength and all of this like emotional labor on behalf of people in need. And they work sometimes the hardest on behalf of those in need. The 8s who have really integrated, they have learned this incredible balance of pulling in their strength and using it as an asset, while at the same time honing in on their vulnerability to invite connection. So they can do this on a mass level, right? If they're advocating for something, instead of kind of what their low-level behavior might be, which is to just be like, you're wrong, I don't want to hear anything you have to say, they might really be able to pull in some of that power they have in vulnerability to listen and connect, while also pushing people past their comfort zone into doing the hard work.
Yes, it's so fantastic. I have several 8s, very healthy, integrated 8s in my life, and that is exactly how I experience them. And even though 8s sometimes get this, I think, unfair reputation of being challenging to be in relationship with, that has not been my personal experience with most of the 8s in my life. There is such an ability to be in like deep, meaningful connection that's sincere without sacrificing any of their power or their strength in the world. So let me ask you this, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. If we have an 8 in our lives, if we're married to one, or maybe we are parenting an 8, or a really close worker or a best friend is an 8, what is the best way that we can show up for them and love them well? Like, what communicates to them, I see you, I am for you, like, you can trust me?
eights are so used to being the strong ones that in loving the eights in our lives, we have to show them that we can stand our ground. They have to know that in order for them to rest, they need to see our strengths. So a lot of times we find our eights in relationship to people who maybe aren't as comfortable expressing their strength and standing their ground. And that means that the eight never gets to let go and be the one who's quote unquote weak in the moment, right? Where do they get to lay their head? Because our eights tend to kind of carry the burden for all of us. And so to love an eight, you have to power up sometimes and just show them, I'm not going to back down. You're allowed to break down here, and it won't break me down.
Wow, that's so good. It's so great that you say that, because that is not at all the way that some of the other types would feel loved. It's just so useful, not only to understand our own selves, but the people that we love. Such an incredible relational tool. Because for the people who would find powering up to feel like conflict, maybe, or aggression to an eight, they're like, oh, finally. Oh, thank you. I can sit on the couch because you're okay. That is just such a great tip. Okay. These are 3 quick questions that we're asking all of our Enneagram experts in this series. And so you just pop off here. Obviously, being a 7-8 is wonderful. We wouldn't change you, and nor would you change you. But if you could choose to be any other Enneagram number, even for a day, which number would you choose? Why?
I secretly wish I was a 5. I try to pretend like I'm a 5 all the time because they do the thing, I'm very good at picking up lots of information in lots of different topics. And they're really good at committing and going really deep into one topic. And that's something that takes a significant amount of effort for me. Committing to one thing, it takes a lot of effort. And I just like the idea of being I'm just like to read my books, and I'm so independent and don't need entertainment all the time. And I know how to manage my energy and set good boundaries. And that's an idealized version of who I am that I would really like to just lean into.
So nice. Our 5s are going to love hearing that. 5s are not very well understood in general. That's my experience. I think they're going to love to hear that wonderful view of one of their greatest strengths, which is so true. Okay, if we kind of swapped that a little bit, which part of your personality and type do you love the most about yourself?
I think I'm very resilient. Life can hand me anything, and I keep going, and I keep going with belief that it will always get better.
Here is the last question that we actually ask every single guest in every single series, this question. It's from Barbara Brown Taylor, who's just a fan favorite around here. And you can answer this literally however you want. Big, small, important, not important. What's saving your life right now?
Plants. I'm going to say plants.
Oh, tell us more.
Well, okay. So right now, we're all staying at home. Most of us are. And I am a 7, and I have traditionally in my life been the kind of person who woke up in the morning, left for the day, and came home right before dinner, or right when it was time to go to bed, all day out. And so being home all day, I have had to have something to tinker with. And so I have filled my home with plants. I started a garden, and it just gives me a place to kind of put all of that excess energy that could go into things that would be much more stressful. Yeah, so plants, I think they're keeping me sane.
I love that. Okay, Sarajane, really quickly before we get off, will you just tell my listeners where they can find you, where you're at on the internet, and what you're working on? What can we look forward to next from you?
You can find me at Enneagram and Coffee on Instagram and on the podcast. If you want to kind of stay in touch with more of my life, I have Sarajane Case, which is more behind the scenes, organization type stuff. And then I have a book called The Honest Enneagram, and I have a relationships course coming out as we're speaking. It is in mid-launch, all about the Enneagram and relationships.
Oh, yay. And so do we find that online? Is that at your website?
You can go to Instagram and find it, and it's linked on enneagramandcoffee.com as well.
Oh, perfect. How wonderful. Thank you for coming on today. I'm so happy to meet you. Then when we're back out in the world, and if we're ever in the same town together, I would love to meet you in person and give you a big squeeze.
Oh my gosh, I would love that. What a joy.
As the weather heats up, Rothy's is here to brighten your day with comfortable, washable, and sustainable products. You know, you guys, that I love Rothy's. Their shoes are incredibly comfortable. And thanks to their seamlessly knit design, there's zero break-in period. They have tons of styles to choose from, which make them the perfect pair of shoes for literally any adventure. Plus, Rothy's are fully machine washable, which feels important, especially in the summer. And now, to accompany your cute shoes, Rothy's offers super cute bags. Yay! As a company, Rothy's is incredible, by the way. They've kept over 50 million single-use plastic bottles out of landfills and transformed them into their signature thread, which is what they use to knit into all these beautiful, sustainable products. I mean, come on. So check out all the amazing shoes and bags available right now at rothys.com/forthelove. I'll spell that. It's Rothys, ROTHYS.com/forthelove. Style and sustainability meet to create, I promise, your new favorites. So head to rothys.com/forthelove today. Okay, back to our show. And now, to reveal more of the mysteries inside an Enneagram Eights mind, here is Enneagram teacher Abby Robbins. Abby, delighted to welcome you to the For the Love podcast. Thank you for saying yes to this today.
Well, yeah, thank you for asking me. It was a very exciting Twitter message to get.
That happened really fast. Listen, Twitter can make fast friends out of people. And so I was just like, whoop, right into a DM. All right,
perfect.
I'm going to meet. So fantastic. So I have filled in my listeners a little bit about who you are, but I wonder if you would be willing to talk a little bit more about you, your story, your life, your Enneagram work, because you're certified as a teacher in the narrative tradition, which is not something we've talked about in this series yet. So can you talk about both what that means and kind of high level who you are, what your life looks like for the rest of us?
Yeah, definitely. My name is Abby Robbins. I'm an Enneagram teacher and coach and a yoga therapist. I've been doing this work here in Austin, Texas for the last 2.5 years. Oh my gosh, maybe it's 3.5 now.
Time goes fast.
Yeah, I live here in Austin, Texas with my fiance and our 2 daughters. And I was certified as an Enneagram teacher in the narrative tradition. And essentially the key components of the narrative Enneagram are that we learn the types from the types themselves. So their main focus of teaching is through the panel method. So getting a group of, 5 or 6 or 10 of one type up on stage to, share what it's like to be them. So like imagine what you're doing with this podcast, but instead of the kind of highly specific way that the type is showing up for one person, you get the ability to see how that type shows up kind of over a wide swath of different kinds of people who've had different kinds of experiences. And so, their approach is kind of intentionally intersectional. I mean, as much as the Enneagram has been, which is really awesome. And through the panel method, you really get to see a lot of the nuance in each type, right?
Sure.
Like these types show up in a myriad of different ways. But you also really get to see like what are the fine threads that are tying these people together and how they see the world. I chose the narrative Enneagram for that reason, because the panel method is so powerful, but also because they have a really strong focus on the somatic parts, right? So like the body work, the energetic work that obviously kind of goes into all of these type structure things. Like it's not just a head or a heart thing. It is also very much a body thing.
I really appreciate the inclusion of the body piece that so often gets left behind, just left out entirely. We just deal in mind and heart issues, kind of leaving the body entirely out of the conversation, which doesn't really even make sense.
No,
because
it doesn't.
We experience everything through our bodies, and our bodies have so much to tell us about what we're responding to. And so I really love it. I love having the body piece integrated into this specific work. So you're an 8, which is sometimes called the challenger. And some of the literature around an 8, of course, they're all reduced. If you have to put a phrase on any one given type, it's going to be reduced. But one of the phrases that gets attached sometimes to the 8 is the need to be against. Now, to me, seems like that can be a really wonderful and important thing, especially right now, the injustices that we're fighting against in our world. Like, what an incredible trait to have. So as you use particularly your strength as an 8 to fight against injustice, unfairness, things that are wrong, things that keep people disenfranchised, how do you feel your particular work keeps you on the path of a healthy 8? Like, how do you stay kind of in that zip code of your type?
Oh, goodness. Well, this is a really great question. It's a hard question to answer because, quite honestly, not only as an 8, but as a queer and non-binary 8, I'm definitely not the most marginalized person in the room, most days, but I have experienced a lot of difficulty because of who I am, right? And it's difficult to find a way to, stay on the quote unquote path of a healthy 8 when there is so much, legitimate threat to my life and well-being. I live in Austin with my fiance, and we're incredibly lucky to live in Austin, right? Yeah. But like, my family lives in Kansas City, and if we want to go visit them, over the holidays, like, we have to drive through Oklahoma. So like, we know what gas stations we can stop at, right? And which ones we can't. It's a difficult thing, right? Like, because I have to balance this very legitimate need to protect myself, right? And to protect my family from these sorts of things, and to not be consumed by that, to not be consumed by that drive. This is why so much of my work in the Enneagram community is about kind of this intersectional approach to the Enneagram. Right. Because for somebody who is straight, cisgendered, white, all of these kind of very central cultural experiences, right, what growth and staying on the path of being a healthy 8 look like is very, very different, right? And a lot of the kind of kitschy things you might throw at an 8, right, the like platitudes or whatever, they don't always fly with people with more marginalized identities. Because
I'd love to hear you talk about that more.
A big key word for the 8 is trust, right? Learning to let go and to trust the people around you, to trust that you won't be betrayed. Just like I was saying about that, driving through Oklahoma, it's hard to practice that trust. Sure. When there is a very real and legitimate threat to your well-being. Like, it's one thing if it's easy for a cis straight white dude to practice trusting other people because he's not actually in harm's way most often, right? Like, culturally speaking. And, every step you take away, every step farther away you get from that kind of centralized identity it becomes harder and harder to practice that trust because so much more is on the line. Yep. And so I think for me personally, this question of like, how do I stay on the path of being a healthy 8? I have my own teacher and my own yoga therapist that I see, religiously every 2 weeks. As much as I can now in this time. Obviously we're in COVID times and the lockdown and whatnot. Like, I'm really working to stay active in my communities and stay connected to people. So in my church community, in my Enneagram community, there's a thriving Enneagram community here in Austin. And, even in my neighborhood, like, I feel like that's one blessing of the lockdown is we've really gotten to be good friends with our neighbors, like the people who we're in proximity with. And so, doing that and, really staying connected to my partner and doing as much as I can to stay committed to my own personal practice. These are the things that keep me on that path, right? And help to give me the discernment of like, when I need to put the guard dogs away, right? Yeah. And when I can, practice trusting people, and when I need to have those pit bulls like front and center. Sure. And that's the thing with a lot of the Enneagram community in general. We talk about, we're trying to overcome our types. We're trying to grow out of our types. And the reality is our types are necessary. Right. They are very valid ways of moving through the world. Absolutely. We just don't want to be locked in, right? Yeah. Like, we want to have the flexibility to do something else when something else is called for.
Totally. Well, and the Enneagram gives us so many opportunities for growth like that. Just really clear paths, and I've gained so much clarity on possibilities for me in front of any given scenario. So I know what my instinct would choose, and sometimes that's the right thing. And sometimes that can be overcome when I want it to be, when I need it to be, when the situation calls for it to be. Yeah. And again, I find the Enneagram so useful there because I'm able to say, your gut instinct is saying this, but it's possible that this is just the way you see it. And there may be a different perspective. What is your 8 energy? Where does it kind of come out with the dogs, as you mentioned, primarily in your particular life? What does that look like when the people who know you best and love you most will be like, there's that 8?
It's been interesting. You mentioned earlier, like the need to be against, and I resonate with that to some extent. But for me, it's less a need to be against, but it's just, I'm so for what I'm for that I don't care if somebody else is not, right? Like I'm happy to have difficult what most people would assume are difficult conversations.
Totally.
And I think that
like, bring it on.
Yeah. Like, I think that comes out a lot for me personally, like in how I talk about things, right? And how I'm kind of regularly relating to people. And we had a get together several months ago before the lockdown of the Enneagram community. And a woman had come up to me who was a 2, and she was referencing a workshop that we were in together. Like we both took back in October, I think it was quite a while ago. And she was like, I want to talk to you about the fight we had at the workshop in October. And I gave her the most blank stare. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, and it felt so surreal because it's one of those things that like people joke about in the community, right? Like in the Enneagram literature, it's like, 8s have this way of like, what's a fight to some people is just a lively conversation to an 8.
Sure, absolutely.
And it didn't register for me like at all. Like not in, like I had to be like, you have to explain this to me because I don't remember. I remember at that workshop there was something where I felt real heated, but it didn't involve her like at all. Right. And so I was like, you're going to have to explain this to me, and then we both of course laughed because how hilarious it was, right? That
totally.
Like the 2 was like, oh my God, we had this awful fight and I've been thinking about it for months. And she's like, I've actually really learned a lot from it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, that's
You're like,
great.
Wow, I haven't thought about it one time since that day.
I probably didn't think about it while it was happening.
That's so great. That's actually just so helpful for the rest of us to hear who are not 8s, because some of us who overthink connection we can be convinced that even just a heated discussion or conflict or whatever tension even signals to us disconnection. And it doesn't necessarily for you. Not at all. It's just solving a problem.
Well, and I think even beyond that, for me, it actually does signify connection.
Yes, that's what my 8 tell me.
Like a friend of mine who's a 7, her name's Kim. And, we had a really long kind of heated conversation, and she kind of shared in the middle of it. She's like, I've felt really nervous to talk to you about these things because I don't want to put our friendship in jeopardy. And I was just like, that's not the case. And we've been friends long enough that she's like, yeah, I know that like in my brain, but I'm having trouble really feeling it. And I was just like, like we're good. We can, have these difficult conversations and fight all day. Right. But we're not disconnected. We're not fighting about our actual relationship. Like we're talking about politics or, the current events, whatever. And so I think that that's something, like where the 8 really comes out is just in this, like the way that I approach people most often. I'm big, I'm loud, I'm often in your face, and I don't really care. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
right. That's so great to hear, because one of my favorite 8s is just like, no. When we're in an intense moment, she's like, that to me signifies that you are engaged with me.
Yeah.
It is connection. It is not disconnection. One of the best gifts you can give to yourself is talking to someone. When you take the brave step to ask, can you help me find a path forward in this struggle? That's when you truly grow. If you are looking to take that brave step, BetterHelp Online Counseling is here for you. So with BetterHelp, you can connect with a licensed professional counselor in a safe and private online environment. You can start communicating with your counselor within 24 hours via text, chat, phone, video. And listen, if it's not a great fit, you can even change counselors at no additional cost. I want a life of goodness for you. And to help you get there, BetterHelp is offering all my listeners 10% off their first month. So get started today at betterhelp.com/forthelove. So one more time, that's BetterHelp, like HELP, help.com/forthelove, and get 10% off your first month today. All right, back to our show. So your partner, Danielle, is a 4, isn't that right?
Yes. Yes.
I would love to hear what your relational dynamic is like, a 4-8, and where do those types really absolutely complement one another and work beautifully together? And then what are your growth points? What are the pain points between an 8-4? There always are some, right?
Right? Yeah,
yes.
Always. You know, like you said, like the Enneagram has like offered us so much in terms of our relationship. And I mean, Danielle and I agree that like without the insight that the Enneagram has offered us, we would not be together.
Interesting.
Just
wow.
100%. It has been so helpful. There are some places where like we are just an absolute perfect match. Like we both meet the world with a lot of intensity. We are like very authentic people. Like we are people who value that about others because we're both focused, or I don't know if it's focused, or we both really enjoy and kind of thrive off of intensity. Like we don't scare each other.
That's good.
Danielle is not afraid of me. Danielle's not intimidated by me, which being an 8 and being assigned female at birth, like I have been told that I'm intimidating so many times in my life. And I'm sick of it at this point, right? Like if you're intimidated by me, I'm not going to waste my time. But, you know, Danielle's not afraid of me. She doesn't back down from me. And I'm not afraid of her. Like, I'm not afraid of the emotional intensity that she brings.
Yes, exactly.
And so I think in that regard, we can hold a lot of space for each other. Those are some of the things that I really appreciate about our relationship. She's often game for, you know, the intensity that I bring to things. Like we planted a Corona garden. We decided in our front yard during lockdown that we were going to plant a garden. And of course, we're not just going to have like one garden bed. I spent a week. I have like 8 by 4 1.5 foot deep garden beds that we have like covered our entire yard with. Right. And she's just like, yeah, why not? Right.
That is very big time Enneagram 3 energy you just applied right there. That's exactly how I would have done it. Like, how can this be the biggest and the best? Right. So she's game. She's with it. Because you're right. Enneagram 4s are emotionally intense.
Yeah. And the places where I feel like to be very honest, I feel like the places where we like have, as you said, growth opportunities. the pain points.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. They actually have a lot more to do with our subtype than they have ever done with our actual type. And so learning subtypes was super important for us. She's self-pres and I'm sexual or 1-to-1. And
can you talk a little bit more about that? We've not explored that in great detail in this series.
Yeah, I'll just give a very brief like rundown. You know, there are 3 basic instincts that every human has: the need to self-preserve, like the instinct to keep yourself, your home, right, all of these things safe and around, like you want to survive. So that has to do with like survival, whether it's food, shelter, family, this sort of thing. And then there's the need to create, which is whether that's creating life through like sex in a hetero relation, or whether that's creating from an artistic space, or a lot to do with connection and creativity in the sexual or 1-to-1 instinct. And then there's the social instinct. So this is the instinct that kind of tells us where we are in our community, in our group, in our herd, right? And, according to Enneagram wisdom, there's one of those instincts. We have all 3, but there's one that we tend to hyper focus on. And that affects how our type plays out in the world. And so again, that's super basic. There is so much to know and to read and to understand about subtypes. I would never claim to be the subtype expert, but I've used it enough in my own life that I feel confident talking about how Danielle and I relate from her subtypes.
So her subtype was what? Would you replay with
self-pres? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So she's focused on, the security piece of, making sure she always has enough money, making sure the house is in good order, making sure that, like we're all fed and clothed and right. Like, so very, homebody energy. She likes being at home. She really enjoys the lockdown. Like it's been great for her. Where I'm sexual or one-to-one, and my focus is on like connection. Like I want to be connected to you. I want to be creating a lot of energy around projects and things that I'm doing, right? Like, my spiritual path, like this all kind of falls into that sexual instinct. And, the pain points that we have is like, when things kind of hit the fan, my go-to, like the first thing that I want to secure is the relationship, right? That connection, that intensity that you can have one-to-one with this kind of person. And the first thing that she wants to take care of is like the money, the house. Are these things taken care of? And so, we miss each other a lot in those instances. She's like, I can't connect to you because we have to deal with this issue. And I'm like, how can we possibly deal with this issue if we're not connected? And so again, like the Enneagram has been so helpful, like we went into couples therapy and, our therapist didn't have to do a whole lot because we would just talk Enneagram at each other for, an hour at a time.
We do that too.
Right. And then just like write the therapist a check.
Right. Thank you for listening to us.
Yeah. Right. So, like it's been really valuable to see like how supporting, like how I can support our connection and Danielle's ability to stay connected by being more focused on my career, right? And have more money coming in and be more financially stable. Like that creates a safer space for Danielle to, connect with me the way that I want her to. And, Danielle's done a lot of work around, like, she knows that like, if I'm not feeling connected with her, then I find it terribly difficult to do work, to see clients or to, like whatever it is that I'm doing. I just like, I don't have the energy for it. Like I want to connect to this first. And so, creating space to, connect with me in order to help me, do the things that I want to do. It's been cool to see how we've both grown in these areas where we weren't as attuned before.
Oh, no, I just love it. The subtypes are a really interesting area to explore in Enneagram work, to just deepen our understanding of who we are and the people that we love, and to see new relational possibilities in front of us. It is all possible. It really is. It's just, I feel like this work has armed me with so much compassion and understanding for the people that I love. Whereas perhaps before the Enneagram took a lot of deep roots in our lives, I just always thought, why don't you see this like I do? Why are you like this? The way that I am understanding this scenario is obviously the right way. It's not true at all. And it's a compassionate tool, I think, inside relationships for sure. I love hearing you describe the subtype work. That is, nobody else has really talked about that. Super useful. What would you say if somebody listening is in partnership or in marriage with an 8, or they're parenting one maybe, or they work really closely with an 8, and they find themselves in conflict with their 8? What would you suggest as a spokesman for your people? How might somebody engage in conflict with an 8 to move the thing toward resolution quicker? What works for you? What do you need in that moment?
The thing that I think surprises people the most about being in conflict with an 8 is that the less you back down, the faster it's going to be over.
It's so weird. It's so fascinating.
There's very few things in this world that like upset me more than somebody who's not willing to stand their ground. Honestly, every 8 is different. Every person is different, right? And obviously at different levels of ability to listen and to understand. But I think, really assuming positive intent goes a long way with an 8. Just not backing down. Like, if you really think that your way is better, show me. If your way is better, fine, let's do the better thing. But you're going to have to like convince me first. And if you're not willing to stand up and to really say what you think or believe in these instances, then you've just proved to me that I have every right just to walk all over you. You don't actually believe anything that much. And again, this is what the type structure says. This is not actually true, because I know there are plenty of people in the world who believe things very deeply and who are very conflict averse and have difficulty stepping into that space.
Right.
But, you know, as far as like speaking from the 8, and what we do really well with is, you know, having somebody stand up to us, because then we know that we're in connection. Then we know that this is worth fighting for, right? Being honest and upfront with your 8 friends is going to go so far.
Totally.
You know,
it's so true.
If you've got like resentment or, you know, things harbored from a long time ago, we feel it and we don't like it.
Yes.
And what you're telling me is that you don't actually care enough about the relationship to bring these things up.
Wow.
Right. And to talk these things out and to actually engage in what's happening. And that's really what we're looking for, right? Is this engagement, this connection that's born of, you know, the conflict. I always think about like sparring, right?
Yeah.
You can't get much closer to a person than when you're sparring with them, right? Like when you're actually like fighting with them. I know not every type feels that way.
They don't. The 9s are withering. They're dying. They're like, yes. Oh, don't make me.
Yeah. You know, but there is, I think for those of us who are learning the Enneagram, you know, it's our responsibility to be the ones who step outside of ourselves in order to make things change, right? So like if you're listening to this and you're not an 8, but like you've been studying the Enneagram and you want to put this stuff to work in your life, and you've got an 8 friend or partner or boss or coworker or whatever it is, you know, it is up to you to make the first, you know, out of pattern move, right?
I like that.
Because it's not the other person's responsibility. They haven't signed up for this journey, right?
Yes.
Like we can't put that on them. And I feel like that's a lot of the conversation around 8s, is that like 8s need to do this and 8s need to do that to make everybody else comfortable. And it's like, okay, for me on this journey, yeah, I'm working on a lot of those things. But if there's an 8 who hasn't signed up for this journey, they're not going to do that. It's not their responsibility.
That's right. And it's actually a relief to hear you say that friction or tension, that high level of engagement, it's not off-putting to you. That actually to me is a relief. That helps me know that really I can be fully expressive with my 8s in my life. That will not push them away from me. And I don't have to hide or pretend with them. That to me feels like great news. Wonderful news.
And we want it. We crave it. Like if you're not doing that, we know it and we don't feel close to you.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
As someone running her own business, you know I'm always on the hunt for things that make my life easier. And you know what makes my life easier? Not going to the post office. Stamps.com has made hauling all my letters and packages and standing in line a thing of the past. Stamps.com allows you to print shipping labels at home or in your office for a cheaper price than going to the post office, so you save time and money. I know my team appreciates Stamps.com because we use it every single month for the Jen Hatmaker Book Club. It's amazing. Right now, my listeners get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale without any long-term commitment. So just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in "For the Love." Okay? So that's stamps.com and then enter "For the Love." Okay, back to our show. Okay, these are the last questions that we're asking everybody in the Enneagram series. And so you can just, top your head here. So obviously, we all love who we are. We don't want to be somebody else. But let's just say for a day, you could choose to be a different Enneagram number. What would you reach for?
I would definitely choose to be a 3.
Oh, you would? Tell me why. Yeah. No 100%. One ever picks that.
No. Okay, here's the deal. Like 3s are often just as intense, right? Like it's all the good things about being an 8, but so often Like, I wish I had the sense of what people thought of me and like how I was coming across. And I wish I was able to like be flexible enough to be like able to make things happen the way that threes do. Like a lot of the same intensity, but often you're a lot better at it than I am because you can do those shifting things. That feels so difficult for me. Right? Like I don't have a sense of how I'm coming across to other people. Yeah. And that's why, you know, if things like, oh, you're intimidating or whatever, like those things, like they hurt, you know, they come as a surprise to me because I have a very different kind of experience of myself. Like I am trying to be friendly and kind and considerate, right? But I often do that with so much energy that it puts people off. It'd be nice to be able to read the room a little bit better.
Oh, what a charitable reading of a 3. That was nice. That's great. Okay, how about the opposite of that? Which part of your personality do you love the most?
Ooh,
Eights are so wonderful. They're so great in the world. I love the 8s in my life so much.
I really like being an 8. You know, like I say, I would definitely choose to be a 3 for a day, but I would definitely want to come back to being an 8.
Yeah, good.
There are a lot of things that I really like about it. I mean, I like that I'm, for the most part, very practical. Like the work that I do in the world is it's accessible because it's right here, right now. You know, it's like, let's put boots on the ground. I like that I'm protective, you know, and I feel like my fiance and my family like really benefit from that. And I enjoy doing that. Like that feels like a service in the world that I do really well at. And I like being intense. And
me too.
Right? Like I like being myself to the fullest possible extent. Even years before I knew the Enneagram, I always had this sense that like, if I just go real hard, then everyone else will know it's okay to go hard too. Right? Like they can be themselves. Like if I'm unabashedly myself, then other people can do it too. And I can, lead by example in that way. And, and I appreciate that. Like I appreciate that question because 8s get a real bad rap, right? Like, and the truth is like, I like being an 8. I like who I am. And obviously there are a lot of pieces that need some work. Right.
But that's all of us.
Yeah. And, I'm not here to like pathologize my personality. I'm going to celebrate the pieces of myself that I feel like need celebrating. And I'm going to work on the places that need work.
I love that. I think your assessment of yourself is spot on. I feel incredibly safe with the 8s in my life. They give me a sense of safety in more than one way. The 8s are a harbor for the people in their lives. Yeah. And it's just a wonderful trait. And I love the 8 energy. Every 8 in my life is precious to me. Here's the last question. We ask everybody this question actually in all the series. It's from Barbara Brown Taylor, who we love here. Please answer this however you want. Like this can be a really earnest answer or it can just be like ridiculous. It's just completely up to you. So here it is. What's saving your life right now?
I mean, honestly, Danielle is saving my life quite a bit. Our kids are saving my life quite a bit. Gardening, the simplicity of like going outside and like watering plants and watching things grow and getting to do that with Danielle and our kids. Yeah. And I feel like it's so important right now because it's hard to put a finger on what it is that's saving my life when I feel like I need so much saving. Just, this time is hard.
Sure
and,
is.
Like I have a great community of friends, right? Like, and wonderful people, like Stout House Coffee Company is saving my life literally every day.
That's a great list.
It has to be a list because I need way too much saving for one thing.
You're so right. You're so right. The question is rigged right now. Okay. I'm so delighted that you came on today. You just spoke so candidly about 8s. That helps me understand. You said several things I hadn't really heard before. So incredibly useful. So would you mind telling everybody before we sign off here where they can find you? Because you're doing such interesting work in the world. And I would love for my community to be listening to you and following you and experiencing your work.
Yeah. So you can find all of my stuff at consciousenneagram.com. So CONSCIOUS Enneagram.com. I always say that was the worst branding mistake ever, choosing 2 words that people can't spell very often.
Totally true. You're so right.
And that's where you can find most of the things. Conscious Enneagram on Instagram. I'm usually pretty active over there, and on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. And if people listening are interested in the Enneagram and also happen to have a queer identity, I run the Queer Enneagram Facebook group, which is actually growing pretty large. This is cool. I'm excited about it. We talk about, kind of this intersectionality of the Enneagram in this piece. And there's more kind of coming in the next years when I can get the rest of my life together.
I love hearing that.
Yeah. And then I have a book coming out in April. The Conscious Enneagram will be out on April 27th of 2021, but available for pre-order in July at some point. So that's really exciting. The website's really the easiest way to find everything. Those are the highlights for sure.
That is exciting. Congratulations on all.
Thank you.
Big things in your next calendar year. Fantastic. I'm grateful for your work and how you specifically run along the fault lines of intersectionality. I think that's really important, and a lot of fresh frontier, new soil to churn up specifically inside this conversation. So good for you for being a pioneer. And I'm really happy to hear that community is growing and finding traction with one another and kind of in the greater conversation. And so hooray for that. I'm just delighted to meet you. And now we're friends and we live in Austin. And when the world opens back up someday, Texas is a mess right now, but we will,
it might be
we'll go to your coffee place. We will patron the coffee place. We will thank them for saving your life, and it'll be coffee on me.
Oh, all right. That sounds good.
Yes. Thank you, Abby.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate it.
And now, to tell us more about the music you've been listening to in this episode, we hear from composer Ryan O'Neill, aka Sleeping at Last, about the inspiration behind this piece.
I have a lot of amazing type 8s in my life. They actually somehow make up the majority of my friends, oddly enough. So that fact, along with the not so hidden direct and outspoken qualities about the type 8, I was really nervous about writing this one. I knew right away that the 8s get the short end of the stick in a lot of conversations about the Enneagram. It's so easy to focus on the intensity, but there's so much more there. And I really wanted to write a song that could capture the nuance and the beautiful vulnerability of the type 8. To lean into this direction, I was actually going to write it as the most intimate and sparse song in this collection. But the more I thought about it, and the more I read about the type 8s, a quote from Beatrice Chestnut made a lot of sense to me. And she said that the type 8 superpower is actually superpower. And I knew that the instrumentation then needed to be strong and actually sound powerful. So even the key, I chose to record the song at the very tippy top of my vocal range. So recording it was intense, and honestly, in my vocal takes, I nearly passed out because I was borderline yelling these lyrics. And I also wanted the lyrics to include a lot of verbs, because I feel like type 8s are sort of the people version of verbs. So in my research, I had a lot of conversations with different type 8s, and I noticed some commonality. They referenced like a moment in their life where they sort of felt like something shifted, almost like they had enough. And so that's where I started the lyrics of this song. And as their story continues throughout the song, the armor slowly comes off, and they offer up this incredibly sweet childhood vulnerability that is such a gift. And that letting go transforms the armor into justice and transforms the type 8s into these powerful figures standing up for others that can't. So the song softens in moments of vulnerability, but ends with this strength and power again, but channeled into protection of others. So my hope for this song is to underscore the sensitivity of the type 8, the strengths and the vulnerabilities, and I just really hope it honors these incredibly powerful people. I'm shattered.
I want to thank both my guests today for being amazing. Thank you for bringing your expertise to bear on this conversation. Thank you for your incredible energy in the world and all you have offered us and continue to offer us. I sure do love an 8. So I hope that was useful to our 8s listening and everybody who loves an 8. And that means that we have one more episode in the series, and we will move finally next week to our Enneagram Nines, the absolutely beloved 9s, who have been very, very funny on all my social media accounts as we've been posting these episodes weekly, one at a time. And they're like, well, the 9s are last, but don't worry about it. We're fine. We're fine. We're not going to complain. Everything's fine. Which, if you don't know what a 9 means, you'll find out next week. It's just very on brand for a 9. And so, as mentioned, as teased out, next week I talk all things 9 with one of the greatest ones I know. Delighted to welcome back to the podcast my dear, dear, dear friend, Sarah Bessie. And she is so well-versed in the Enneagram, and she was teaching me about it long before I understood it. And so she just has, you'll love it. You'll love her episode. It's just that simple. You'll love it. Everybody come back next week for our final episode in the series. Okay, you guys, thank you for sharing these so much. You've been sharing these episodes just a billion times. And so tag your friends who you think would love to hear each one. Post it on your socials. We love it. Make sure you're subscribing too, so my episodes can come right to your ears. You don't even have to work for them. Okay, you guys. Love it. Till next time.